started. I will post the link in the chat one more time for anybody who missed it before. We do have a short survey we'd like you to fill out.
All right, great. Thanks for doing that. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sarah. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and the other facilitators of the workshop in just a few moments here. But today we'll be sharing with you how to get involved in research and what to do if you can't find a position this year, because you're probably not alone if that's something that you're experiencing. So before we begin the workshop, I'd just like to take some time to set some presentation norms. So please just make sure that your microphone is muted except for when you're speaking. We have the little chat box that you can ask any questions in or make any comments throughout the course of the presentation. Myself or one of the other workshop facilitators will be taking time to answer any questions or respond to any comments that you have throughout the course of the presentation. Also feel free to use that raised hand or any of the reaction functions throughout the course or during the discussion that we have afterwards. And if you're comfortable doing so, feel free to either turn on your camera during the workshop or during the discussion, just so we can get a sense of who's here, what you look like, and have a little bit more sense of normality. So just an overview of the agenda. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what the STAR Scholars Program entails, so that if you're interested in participating and applying, you'll know what that actually looks like. And then we'll have the workshop seminar facilitator introductions, followed by an overview of what traditional research involvement looks like. And since a lot of what happens in research these days isn't really quite traditional, we'll give you an overview of how to sort of recalibrate your expectations, followed by a positive note looking to the future so that we can end on something a little bit more optimistic and give you some goals for how to end and where to go from there. So, the STAR Scholars Program is an acronym for Students Tackling Advanced Research. It's part of the University of Michigan, and it's not really a research initiative in and of itself. Rather, it's a program designed to enhance scholarship, transferable skills, academics, and research experience for these students. So as participating in the program, students gain these skills as a result of their participation. And there are a variety of goals and benefits to participating in the program. So some of the goals include preparing students to actually be researchers and understanding what research process involves. There are also a lot of structured mentor opportunities throughout the program. So that's one of the biggest components. Is the undergrad students are generally paired with 2 or 3 other undergrad students and 1 graduate student who's typically a psychology PhD student. Throughout the course of the program, they have either one-on-one or small group mentoring opportunities where they learn different skills from their graduate student. And this is a huge, one of the huge components of the program that's really advantageous. In these mentoring opportunities, there's also increased number of students who can actually learn how to conduct advanced research. So again, we're not actually like showing you how to get a research, well, not giving you research experiences, but showing you how to get a research experience and what that looks like. And we're also looking for students who are inclusive of all different types of communities. So we're academically supporting all different types of individuals. And the benefits include, as I alluded to earlier, mentoring from a current grad student, a lot of different kinds of informational panels. So students who are either former STAR scholars themselves, or maybe grad students who have moved on from being a mentor in the program, and they can come in and tell you what their career now is and how they got involved through their career trajectory. There are a variety of skill workshops as well. So maybe how to build a resume or a CV, what that even looks like to begin with, and how to get involved in research, where to look for research opportunities, how to interview, all kinds of different things that you might not otherwise know, and scientific talks and discussions. So throughout those scientific talks and discussions, we also establish different things like what it means to be part of a scientific talk, what the etiquette's like, how to ask good questions, how to follow up after a talk, and then networking. So not just networking with your classmates, but also the graduate students and how that could lead into different career opportunities or research opportunities. So the ultimate goal of the STAR research program is to prepare these students with these research skills to look more competitive for ultimately landing a research position or apply to grad school or a private sector or industry or whatever it is in the job market. So really, we're trying to prepare you with the skills it is that you need in order to kind of land your dream job. whether that's research or industry or grad school, we're preparing you for whatever skills it is that you'd like to have for that. So there are a variety of eligibility requirements that we're looking for. Typically, we look for students who identify with groups that have been historically underrepresented in research. And these can include some of the following, like first-gen students, students who are either undocumented or from international backgrounds, students who come from a variety of racial or ethnic groups, and students who represent a variety of sexual orientations or gender minorities as well. We are also looking for students who represent what we call the Rackham Merit Fellowship Group. So these are students who have experienced maybe financial hardships or have demonstrated a commitment to diversity either at their university or in their community at large. In terms of admissions, our deadline for application is coming up pretty quickly. So these are what we typically look for in applications. We look for students who have strong academic and performance potential. We are also definitely interested in students who demonstrate an interest in research. So maybe biopsychological, but definitely psychology research in some kind, because this is really ultimately the core of our program. We also are interested in students who have a strong desire for mentorship, because ultimately, because it's such a strong component of the program and you're getting a lot of those one-on-one mentoring opportunities, it's important that you're receptive and eager to have mentorship throughout the duration of the program. And in terms of years in college, we're most likely looking for freshmen, sophomores, and junior status. Sometimes we do make exceptions for seniors, depending on if you're planning to take an extra year, but typically those are the years that we're most interested in for application. And as I mentioned, the deadline is coming up relatively quickly. It's November 6th, and I think that's next week. So if you're interested in learning more about the program, here is our website. So you can either do that, or you can check out some more information on the form. And you could also just send us an email. It's like starscholars@umich.edu. And just so you're aware, these slides will be available to you later. So you don't have to scramble to write all of this information down. Yeah, and so please reach out if you have any questions about the program in general, applying, or otherwise. So that's just a little bit about the Star Scholars program. We'd love for each and every one of you to apply. It's an amazing program. And now we're just going to talk a little bit more about who each of us are and then jump into the workshop. So my name is Sarah Stillwell, and I am a fifth-year PhD student in the combined program in education and psychology. I'm a former elementary school teacher. I taught kindergarten and fourth grade, and now my research interests revolve around understanding what effective classroom instruction is, particularly in the elementary school context in kindergarten through fifth grade. So I research things like project-based learning, which is an alternative approach to pedagogical programs. Instead of like teaching kids to the test, it's kind of teaching them why learning in the real world matters. Before coming to University of Michigan, I did my undergrad at Kalamazoo College and my master's at University of Michigan in elementary education. I'm from around Ann Arbor originally, but I moved around a bunch before I settled back here for my PhD. And I love mentoring. I think it's a really important part of being in the PhD program. And I really hope that some of you will come into the STARS program. And next we'll hear from Isaiah.
Yeah, so hi everyone. It's so good to virtually, maybe not see, but to know that everyone's there. So yes, I am Isaiah. I am a sixth-year PhD student working in the clinical area with Luke Hyde and Rosario Ceballo. I'm originally from Queens, New York, and I did my undergrad at Wesleyan University in psychology. In terms of research, I'm interested in studying the impacts of poverty-related stressors on parenting as well as general family functioning. So I'm really excited to be a part of the Star Scholar program because I myself, I consider myself a beneficiary of these really great similar programs. So in my undergrad career, I was a McNair Scholar. I also participated in the Leadership Alliance summer research program at Stanford University. And I myself am a first generation college student, and I really think that without having had these experiences, I probably would not have had the guidance or the wherewithal to know what to look for and how to navigate academia. So, and I still don't really know how to navigate academia. It's not really something that they teach you explicitly. So yeah, I will pass it to Nia now.
Great, thanks. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's evening to me. I'm a morning person, so please bear with me. So I am Nia, as I said. I am a third-year student in the Combined Program for Education and Psychology. I am from Maryland, right outside of DC, and I'm currently working with Yulia Kovelman and Nicole Gardner-Neblett, generally studying culture, neuroscience, and how kids learn to read, so language and literacy, neuroscience and culture, trying to combine all of those things. And I did my undergrad at the University of Maryland, College Park. And I also participated in the Leadership Alliance, but actually kind of opposite from Isaiah. I did not have a lot of good mentoring when I went through college and even in high school. And now I have good mentoring and I really like mentoring. I always have a lot of research assistants under me. So I feel like I'm always mentoring. And I'm just so happy to be part of this formal space now where I'll also get to mentor in a different capacity. So yeah, glad to see everyone virtually and hopefully it's a great semester and COVID might calm down a bit.
Thanks, Isaiah and Nia. And we'll hear from them a little bit later throughout the presentation. So now we're going to move into some of the main themes about how to secure a research position. So first we'll talk a little bit about traditional research involvement and why it's important to get involved, how to define and refine your research interest, and where to go from there. So some of these themes that we present may not be totally applicable, so take them all with a grain of salt given where we are in our current climate. So hopefully we'll get back to regular research as we once knew it in someday, but for now, we'll just talk about what traditional research involvement looks like. So there are a variety of benefits to becoming involved in research as an undergraduate. One of them is you have the ability to build transferable skills. And when we talk about transferable skills, these are things that you can learn during your research involvement that don't just help you in a research setting, but things like effective communication and working in a group and how to, sit down at a computer and work individually and also be able to shift gears. These are skills that help you just in so many different capacities. So these are immensely beneficial in myriad ways. So these transferable skills you learn in undergraduate research, and we can't harp on this enough. We have an entire workshop about transferable skills in the STAR Scholars Program. Beyond that, the undergrad research involvement can help you look really competitive for grad school. So sometimes just putting that on your resume can make you look more competitive than one candidate, or it can lead to publications or presentations. In addition, it can help you establish and grow both your academic and your professional network. It also helps you build confidence in either through refining who you are and where you want to go academically, or just the skill set that you have. In addition, it can help you create knowledge for the world. I think one of the coolest things about research is that you can sit down and you can read articles and you develop your own research question, and eventually you create new information that you can then disseminate to other people and put out there and make your own information and knowledge to share with others. I think that is just like one of the coolest things about research. You can also refine your own interests and goals and figure out kind of what you want to be when you grow up, understand what career you want to have and where to go with it. And these are just some of them. I mean, there are so many more benefits to being involved in research. I know my research opportunities didn't happen until much later in my undergraduate career. And I wish I had gotten involved much earlier, but they're still immensely helpful no matter at what point in the game you become involved. So one of the things that's really important is identifying what exactly your research interests are. So there are a variety of ways that you can do that. One of the things that I found to be the most helpful is sitting down and thinking about what topics or classes or instructors have really stood out to you throughout the course of your education. So maybe there was one instructor that you had and a developmental psychology course who you just thought was like the bee's knees, you know, really all of the information there was just so interesting to you, and all of that. Every time you left class, you were still wondering about different questions, or you wanted to, you know, continue reading for that class at your leisure because you were so invested in this particular class. So that's a really good way to sort of reflect on that and think, where can I go with this and do this as independent research? And to that point, you know, those questions that you're wondering about after class, or like maybe sitting and having lunch with, well, virtual lunch with your friends. Maybe you're still talking about these topics and thinking about those too. What really resonates with you? What do you wonder about? What questions do you have that you wish you could answer, but the classes weren't answering for you? That might be a good research trajectory for you as well. Are there topics outside of your major that are of interest to you? So sometimes in your major, there are really particular classes that you're required to take. And within that, maybe there are other things that you'd be really interested in pursuing. So if you're an economics major, you can still do psychology research outside of it, but you would have to do it in a lab setting, maybe for credit or maybe for pay. So you could pursue that as an option too. What are your hobbies? Maybe you're interested in dissecting mice brains on the weekend. Maybe you could turn that into a research opportunity. What skills are you interested in developing? Maybe it's coding, or like maybe you already know how to code HTML. That could transfer really easily into a research opportunity. I think one of the things that's really important is understanding if you're more interested in working individually or as part of a team, because there are lots of different ways that research looks and feels like. And if you're more interested in sitting behind a computer and working strictly with data, that's going to look like a really different research opportunity than working as part of a team where you're all going out into the world together and doing observational research, maybe like in a school or in a clinical setting. So that's a really important question to reflect on. Does location matter to you? Could you move across the world if you found like the dream opportunity, or are you bound to a particular place in geographically? There are different things about the type of research that you want to do, like your participants. Are they going to be humans? Are they going to be animals? Or is there something else that you're interested in working with? So that's a really good sort of guiding place to start as well. And I think one of the things that can be really helpful too is sort of thinking big picture and wondering about your dream career. Once you start there, you can look at job postings and see what kind of qualifications those job postings require, or talking to somebody who's in your dream field and understanding their career trajectory and how they got to where they've ended up. And that can be a really helpful way in identifying your research interest as well. So some things to keep in mind: the responsibilities that you have in a particular lab setting will often vary with experience. So your very first research opportunity, you're not going to come in and immediately start dissecting a mouse. You know, you'll start by understanding low-level protocol, and then once you become more and more experienced and develop higher levels of seniority, you'll also have added experiences, added responsibilities with those experiences. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. For some labs, they have weekly or monthly lab meetings that can be expected, and sometimes those requires like reading ahead of time or filling out some kind of reflective homework kind of thing. So that's something to be aware of as well. Experience in different labs could also result in either like an honors or a senior's thesis, which could lead to a presentation or a publication, which could look really good on your CV. So these are all questions once you identify a particular research interest of yours, and then maybe a lab that you're interested in working with. These are questions that you should ask that lab so that you have a better idea of what your day should look like in the day-to-day. And just moving on. So now that you have identified your research interest, what do you do from there? So imagine you've had this sort of like aha moment that you want to study developmental psycholinguistics. You know that for sure. Where do you go from there? The best place to start is by visiting your psych department website. Once you've done that, there's often a list of the faculty members who are there, and it can lead you to the lab websites as well. So the faculty profiles will review what the faculty actually research, and the lab websites will tell you what ongoing projects those labs do and what the lab actually, like what their research looks like. So if they do the lab or if they do the research in the lab, or if they go out to different places and engage in it, or if they're even taking research assistance at all. So that's a really excellent place to start. Another good place to start is by talking to the instructors. So maybe going back to that idea of that one instructor that you just thought was really fantastic, going back and talking to them and asking, are you doing any research right now? What does it look like? And is there any way that I could get involved? You can even just start with sending them an email. And same for like a graduate student instructor or other students that you know of who are involved in research or who have previously been involved in research. Talking to them is an excellent place in understanding how to get involved, what their experiences have looked like, or what kind of research they know of that they could talk to you about as well. We'll share a resource about some opportunities that we know of that could be a good opportunity for the summer or for the future. And also, I think it's really important for you to be realistic with yourself. Research isn't typically a quick process. It takes time, especially right now. So it's really important for you to be realistic with yourself and have realistic expectations about what the process will look like. With that being said, it's also a good idea to consider the big picture. So what does your career look like? What do you hope your career looks like? And with that in mind, how can you move forward in a way that's actually realistic and tangible without setting yourself up for failure? So these are some of the resources that we've put together. As I mentioned, these slides will be available for you later. So these are just, some that we have thought of that we thought might be helpful for you. So there's the Summer Research Opportunities Program, and I know Isaiah and Nia also mentioned that they've been involved in some of these. So you could just start by Googling, and they'll tell you when applications are due, what applications look like, if you need letters of recommendation, if the programs are paid for, so on. Research Experiences for Undergrad, which is sponsored by NSF. And then here at the University of Michigan, we have this Michigan Summer Program in Cognition and Early Development. I should also say it's important to research these to make sure that COVID hasn't impacted the availability of these programs. And then there's also ones that are put together through the Big Ten Alliance. So there are programs that a lot of the different universities have like a network for. And like at the University of Michigan, we have the UROP, the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. And if you don't know where to go, another nice place to start is APA has a careers page, and you can look there and see what can I even do with an undergraduate degree in psychology, and sort of backwards plan from there and understand where to go. So we'll put these to make them available for you later, so you don't have to feel so overwhelmed by what's there. But if you were to imagine you found your perfect lab, and right now you want to send them an email and say, I can't wait to start. When can I be your research assistant? Where do I go from here? We've put together an example email of what you could send to a lab, because right now labs may or may not be taking research assistants. So we have some sample language. So you could say, dear Professor so-and-so, or the lab manager, if that's what the lab website specifies that who you should direct the email to. And then spend a little bit of time introducing yourself and say why it is that you're interested in volunteering or getting research experience at their lab. Of course, you would like to attach your CV or resume. And then one of the things that we think is really important to do right now is understand that there may or may not be positions available due to the pandemic right now. So to have this kind of transitional language of, I know that labs may have limited openings or maybe none at all. So if you do have positions, I'd be grateful for suggestions, or maybe ask them to, would you be willing to keep my information on file if a position does open up? And, be prepared to send this email to a lot of places just in case. And if not, we have some suggestions on how to maximize your time to make sure that if you can get a research opportunity right now, you're doing other things to ensure that you're making the most of the time. So with that, I'm going to transfer over to Isaiah, who will tell you what to do if you can't get a research position.
Thank you so much for all this really helpful information, Sarah. So some of you may be sitting here or laying on your bed or whatever you're doing, thinking, well, what happens if I can't find a position right now? So as Sarah alluded to, this is a truly unique time. We're all sort of collectively trying to manage our expectations. And so you may be asking yourself, how can I get the skills to be competitive if I can't find a position? So this is a very real concern. And what I would like to highlight is that it is still possible to build skills during this time. It just may take a little bit of creativity and resourcefulness. And so I'm gonna just start off. So next slide, please. So before I highlight examples of some of the types of skills that you may acquire and some of the programs that you may learn, I just want to take a step back and provide some tips about how to approach independent skill building. So as Sarah also mentioned, the working backwards approach can be really useful. So looking at people whose work you like and seeing what methods that they use, or if you're in a position where maybe you're not as sure about what you would like to do, you may just start off by looking at some of the more broader appeal types of programs or services that you may learn. Also, it's important to let go of the fear of trying new or hard things. So struggling is a normal part of growth. So just think about a baby learning to walk, or maybe the first time that someone starts to learn how to ride a bike. It may feel really hard at first, but it's really hard to grow if you don't try. So this is actually a really special opportunity in a way to kind of really dive into some things with relatively few things at stake. So this could be an opportunity to try things that maybe you may feel intimidated by, for example. It's also important to find an accountability partner. So if you know you're having a struggle, chances are there are other people that are having similar struggles who also may be thinking, I really want to learn how to build, or I really want to work toward building a skill, but I'm having trouble kind of getting started with that. Chances are you may know someone. If it's not related to this, it may be in a different area. So we really encourage you to find one or even multiple sources of support and hold each other accountable. So set a date in your calendar, do virtual work sessions, and also more importantly, practice celebrating each other when you achieve your goals, but also supporting each other if things don't go as planned. Those are both really important. It's also important to set goals that are SMART. So be as specific as possible when you're identifying what you would like to achieve. Apply some sort of useful metric to it. So saying, I want to code for 30 minutes a day is different from saying I want to learn how to code, right? Have a useful metric that you can use. Also, make sure that it's achievable or attainable. So really look at everything else that you have going on in your life. Think about how you work. Think about the goal itself. Maybe consult with other people about it, and see if it's something that feels realistic to you. Also, so related to that, realistic, making sure that what you are aiming to achieve kind of meets what you're able to do or accomplish at the time. And also time limited. So this is really important, as many of you will find, especially if you go into academia, a lot of the most important things don't have deadlines or clear benchmarks or milestones along the way. It's like, okay, yes, there's this big project that you have to do, but oftentimes it requires a lot of sort of self-direction, which can be really hard. So giving yourself deadlines along the way for things that don't have deadlines or that don't have smaller deadlines along the way can be really useful. Another piece of advice that I would give is to resist the urge to start too many new things at once. So of course, it's really normal to feel excited about research, to feel excited about learning a new topic. But what we find is that taking on too many new things can really contribute to this cycle of getting overwhelmed, having burnout, feeling maybe shame or guilt because you're burnt out and you're not as motivated, and then maybe avoiding. Whereas doing something small and achievable every day, it tends to accumulate over time, and it's often a lot easier to add on things once you feel like you have a good base rather than to take things away. And also lastly, I just want to say, be kind to yourself, right? So if you don't achieve a goal that you set out to do, that's okay. You can still learn from that. And also realize that this is a very strange time, that we're kind of all in this together at every level, from undergraduate all the way up through faculty. We're all trying to navigate this the best that we can. So I'm gonna move to the next slide now and transition to giving a little bit of more advice in this area as far as identifying things that you would like to do and skills that you would like to build. So check method sections of papers from labs you are interested in. So see what other people are doing kind of in the working backwards framework. It's important that if you say that you not just be able to say that you have a skill or put something on your resume, but equally important is being really specific about how you went about achieving that. So if there's any kind of certification that you can get or any kind of course that you can do, that can often be a lot more informative than just saying, you know, I know how to do this or I have some experience with this. And also treat skill learning like a class. So pretend like you're, you know, trying to learn the piano or something like that, where you have to kind of commit a little bit of time to it every day. Next slide. So now I'm gonna provide some different examples of different programs that you can use, that you can learn as far as organizing and finding different references and citations. So Mendeley is the one that I'm most familiar with. It's a really useful resource for collecting citations, for organizing different papers and articles, for literature reviews. It also has a feature where you can set alerts so that if research is published in a specific area, you can get an alert about it. So it can be a really good way of kind of keeping up on what's going on in the research world in the field that you're interested in. And Zotero and EndNote are also two very powerful pieces of software for organizing references. PsycInfo, Medline, and Web of Science, that's more for finding citations. And the U of M library has some really good resources on how to use the software. These are all really powerful tools. A lot of people are really only using them like at a fraction of their capacity. So if you can say, oh, I learned how to do this really cool thing in PsycInfo, or how to refine a search to do a literature review, that's something that could be marketable as well. Next slide. So, right, stats are a big part of psychology research, and gaining competency in this area can take multiple forms, and this is across areas. So one program that I'm sure a lot of you already have is Excel. And similar to the other pieces of software that I highlighted, there's a lot that you can do with Excel that a lot of folks aren't even really aware of. So it is a very powerful program, and learning to use it, so doing tutorials, watching YouTube, doing online courses can be really helpful. As far as statistical analysis goes, this may also be a good time to learn some basic concepts about specific programs. SPSS and R are the most popular. And R is free, I believe. So that is something that you could download and play around with. That's really useful. And some labs also use JASP and G-Power, which I'm not as familiar with, but it's a thing. There are things that people use. Next slide. So some other pieces of software that you may focus on have to do more with data collection. So across areas, with the exception of biopsych, Qualtrics is very popular for building surveys and collecting data. Again, there's a lot of behind the scenes programming that goes into creating these surveys. So coming to the table saying that you know how to do this, that you could potentially come into a lab and get a survey up and running and know how to manage it, is something that a lot of PIs would find really appealing. Other types of data collection software include Prolific, Pavlovia, MTurk, and these are really popular for human subjects research as well. For biopsych and CCN, MATLAB, Python, and the GUI experiment apps are also really appealing pieces of software. And yes, CCN is cognition and cognitive neuroscience. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Oh. All right, so yeah, we're gonna pass it on to Nia.
Yes, I was also just going to add a little tidbit to your slide. So I'm not even in biopsych or CCN, and I've had to learn ePrime and MATLAB. So if you get experience in these things, that would be awesome. Okay, so recalibrating our expectations for the current climate. We all know what the climate is. We're all, for the most part, in the house. And so we have to consider these really relevant questions when you're looking for different research opportunities. And these two questions are, what kind of research are you interested in? And is that research occurring in the current climate due to COVID? And how is it occurring? How might it be occurring? And so we have to consider these relevant changes to certain types of research that typically occur. So I know Sarah described some different types of research that occur typically. So we have neuroscience research in person. There's a lot more different research that's just not listed here, but certain type of research just is not feasibly occurring right now. However, a lot of labs are finding different ways to still engage students in research. But like Isaiah said, you might also have to find different ways to independently gain skills. And here, I just listed out some different research opportunities that still exist to my knowledge, or different ways that labs are still trying to keep students engaged in whatever capacities that they can. Although I know a lot of labs are not accepting as many students, we're still trying to, run virtual testing sessions, whether that be virtual face-to-face or creating an online game for people to send out and gather data that way, or collecting COVID-related data collection. I know I do language and literacy research, and so we're really interested in some naturalistic components that might be changing right now, language use within the house. And so that's an innovative way that we're going to try to engage our research assistants and help us gather some data in that realm. But in terms of our neuroscience work, we're not really able to do much in terms of collecting that data just because it's not safe. So here are just some relevant questions to ask yourself and to consider as you're thinking about how you might get involved in research or along the other lines of skill building. So I think we can move to the next slide, Sarah. Beautiful, thank you. So as Isaiah was mentioning earlier, this is just me continuing, moving forward with intention. There are a lot of skills that you can be building at home. You can be building it independently, or if you're working with a small team or in a lab, you can be building these skills. And so some of these skills just include website design and maintenance, learning how to help support someone who's constructing a grant, an IRB grant, for instance, learning different things associated with neuroimaging analyses. There's several online training courses, a lot of which are free, a lot on YouTube, a lot of videos you could be watching, gaining information that in the typical day-to-day, if we were leaving the house, we might not have the time to sit and watch an hour-long training and really intake that information. And so there are a lot of skills that you could also be building in terms of lit review. I know that was mentioned, but also in your courses and then the readings for your courses, you're also gaining information that way. So really making sure you're being intentional and understanding that maybe the standard research experiences and skills you would gain from being physically in the lab, you might not be able to, but there are a lot of other things that you could be building on in this time, and being intentional and planning that out would be really, really, really beneficial. And then I think we can go to the next slide. Yes, and so this is just continuing to provide resources and additional training. So Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, Code Academy, there are a lot of tutorials. I've been doing some tutorials. They're long, but they're great because I can just pause it, get a snack, come back. So please take advantage of these things. Ask a graduate student. Yes, 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 please ask graduate students. Anyone you know who's in this field right now probably has, some resources that they might be able to share with you in terms of you building some skills at home. And I think we're good to go to the next. Okay, so looking to the future. Okay, so just my last tidbit. Depending on the state of the world in the winter, some labs may or may not try to conduct in-person testing again. So also continue to be vigilant with that. If you know there are some skills that you just cannot gain at home, if there's a safe way that it's occurring next semester, you want to make sure you're up to date on that and keeping a lookout in certain labs, and also maybe networking a little bit so you can have that in if the time does come. Pass it off to you, Cindy.
Okay, let me unmute. So let me just sort of amplify and add to a couple of things that you guys have already said. So first of all, I want to note that all of the recommendations, especially that Isaiah and Nia were talking about, these are not just things that we pulled out of our hats. We actually surveyed basically surveyed people in the psychology department here and asked them, okay, so if somebody was not able to get a research position in your lab this year, this semester, what's the best thing that they could do to prepare themselves to have a research position with you next year, or even to be applying for graduate school. So all of those things that we were talking about, learning these different courses. I will say, I would, if you're only going to do one thing, become an Excel wizard. That was by far the most popular because we all work with data, and no matter what. And I guess go on to, and just to sort of give you an idea here. So the other thing that I want to point out is that, half of the people who responded were faculty members, but you can see a lot of the people who responded were graduate students. And they are really the people who know sort of on the ground what you need to know. So please, feel free, like, in your classes, whether it be your virtual office hours or sending your professor or your graduate student instructor a note in the chat and just say, hey, I'd like to talk about what I can do to prepare myself. The other thing is just to note that we did get a pretty good representation from all of our areas. I would say, the pie chart there is roughly the size of each area. So I think we got pretty good representation there. So go ahead and flip on to the next one. So yes, I know that this is a challenging time, but I do want to emphasize what Sarah said, which is think positive and think creative. I always am a fan of the idea that the obstacle is the way, which is sort of a way of saying, when a challenge comes up, if we can think creatively about how to overcome it, it's kind of a what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And in this case, I would say the current situation that we are in is one that allows us to really sit back and think carefully about, okay, what is it that I really want to do? And what is it that I really want to learn that will get me there? And quite honestly, somebody who came to me and said, you know what, I set aside the time to learn how to do coding, and here's my GitHub page, and here's, I was able to do this experiment, and I learned all this on my own. That would impress me actually much more than somebody who got a lab position, because one of the biggest challenges as you move into graduate school is actually that being able to organize yourself and work independently. So somebody who could demonstrate that to me would move towards the top of my list for admissions pretty quickly. So again, I know this is a really challenging time for everybody, but I would very strongly encourage you to try to see this as an opportunity to actually make yourself stand out and be a star applicant, both for these positions and then ultimately for graduate school, even more than you would be under normal circumstances. And I think that's all we had, unless people have questions.
Yeah, I think that's all we prepared. Thank you so much for those final thoughts, Cindy. And with that, we would like to thank you so much for joining us today. And ultimately, this presentation is meant to support you and facilitate anything that we can do to simplify the process for you. So at this time, if there's any questions that you have or comments that you'd like to present, we'd love to hear your feedback. I do also want to reiterate that these slides will be available for you later. There are a couple additional slides on the presentation that have additional information about some of those research resources, a bit of a tongue twister, that we put earlier. So you can explore those at your leisure. And before we move into Q&A, I do want to just also say that next time the presentation is Life of a Doctor, but Not That Kind. It's Wednesday, November 11th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. So please be sure to register for that. And with that, we'll open it up for questions or comments. And thanks so much for being here.
So I see Arisha raised their hand.
Yeah. I had a question about when we should be like reaching out to professors. Is there like a certain time period where we should be like beginning of each semester, or can we just reach out whenever if we see like an open position?
So I guess I'll address that as a faculty member. I would say reach out whenever, and certainly don't wait to see, like, if you do see an open position advertised, jump on it as soon as you can. But I wouldn't necessarily wait for that, because sometimes, again, especially if you come in and you say like, I can do such and such, even if I don't have a position down, then I'll have you in mind, or we may not have advertised a position yet. I will say, there are times, let me put it this way. If you're really super busy and at a crunch time in your semester, there's a pretty good chance that that is also a crunch time for your professors. So right at the beginning of the semester, right around midterms, and the right before classes end may not be the best time, because we are also human and sometimes don't answer our emails quite as well as we should if things get super busy. So if you can hit a time, let's say, let's say before the semester starts, or when it's kind of going along at a more steady pace, although I realize that everything seems a little crazy this semester. But if you can't avoid the crunch times, you may have a little bit of a better chance too. Transitions between the semesters are a good time. So when one semester ends, and we may be thinking about, okay, so what new projects are we going to be starting next semester? That can be a good time to hit us as well.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy, there was one more question in the chat too.
Oh, about if the STAR program is open to psych majors only? I don't think so. I think you'd have to sort of show a interest in the kind of like research that's related to psychology and be able to build a case for that. But that's actually another thing to keep in mind, and something that I actually have recommended to some folks here, is that you may even want to look, let's say, at a med school or economics department or kinesiology department, or a business school, because a lot of times they have less exposure to undergraduates, than do psychology departments, but there are people in there who may have actually been trained and have their PhD in psychology that are also doing research. So that can also be a creative way to find positions that maybe other people aren't hitting quite as much. So, I would say, if you're interested in decision making, take a look at the economics department in the business school. So there are a lot of social psychologists in business schools. There are a lot of people who are doing more neuroscience research and psychiatry and over in the med school. So that's also an interesting alternative. Clara, you had a question?
Yeah, so I was wondering if you email a professor whose lab you want to join and they don't respond, do you recommend following up or just like forgetting about that lab?
Don't feel bad about following up. Give us, follow up after about a week or so. Again, most of us, we're well-intentioned, but as I said, we're human too.
And then, so how do you recommend like going about a follow-up email? Like, what would you say?
I think just simply saying, I know it's a really busy time, so I just wanted to check in. I'm really interested in your lab. Is probably the best way to do it. The other thing that you can do, again, if it's a lab that you're just dying to get into and the PI is maybe a little bit preoccupied, shall we say, I would actually go ahead and take a look at the lab webpage, see who the graduate students and the postdocs are, and try them. Because in most cases, they're actually the people who are making the decisions about who is joining the lab. So you may even just want to start there.
Great, thank you.
It looked like there was a question from Alicia in the chat. Alicia? Who says, I haven't been able to declare my psych major. Will it harm my chances in a psych lab? My initial response is I'm inclined to say no, but Cindy, if you want to add on to that.
No, honestly, like I think probably more faculty are interested in taking on students who are in their freshman and sophomore years. In some ways, like your hardest or your least chance of getting into a lab is if you're applying like your senior year, especially second semester your senior year. So if you're at an early stage, we actually see that as an advantage because we realize you may be coming in with fewer skills to begin with. But if there is a chance that we can have you around for 3 or 4 years and you can really show progress in the lab, that is very appealing to us.
I had one more question. You guys were talking about like messing around with like applications and websites. Is there something that professors and GSIs like look for, or is it just, verbal like message like, oh, I've, tried these programs and I'm comfortable with them?
I would say the more that you can back it up, the better. So let's say, if you, learn, so what might you be interested, like what area of psychology are you interested in?
I'm actually not that interested in psychology.
Okay. What are you interested in?
I'm interested in gynecology and obstetrics.
Okay.
So I'm planning on looking for a research opportunity in that,
Okay, so I cannot tell you as much about what would be a useful skill to obtain in gynecology or obstetrics. My guess is that probably like, to the degree that they're doing research, again, Excel or one of the statistics programs is always going to be helpful for pretty much any kind of research. So in that case, what you may want to do is be able to say like, I have completed the Microsoft certification for XYZ in Excel. Like that will, be a very solid thing. That can be expensive, so if you don't want to spend the money on the certification, what you could do for Excel is say like, I can do, these following things. I can do a pivot table. I can do macros. I know how to do conditional formulas. and list out your skills a little bit more specifically. If you're doing programming or coding, I would say something that's probably going to knock the socks off of people, even though it's really not that hard, is learn just a little bit of GitHub, enough to make yourself a GitHub page. It's actually quite easy. They give you a good tutorial, and you post your code up there, and basically say like, look, even though it was this, little sample program, I made something from scratch and I can make it run. And that's huge.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
And I think just to add on to that a little bit, to be able to have those transferable skills in a section on your CV to say, like, I can code in HTML, or I'm proficient in Excel, to have that line stand out on your resume or CV can sometimes be enough to set you apart. So if you have GitHub on your CV, that might be a more tangible way to have that skill instead of like having a very particular way. So that way, if you send it off to a lab or a professor that you're interested in working with, they can just see it right there and be able to follow up with you specifically and say, well, what is it about HTML that you know how to do? Or like, show me what it is that you've done. So you can just put it there on your resume is maybe a placeholder.
Okay, thank you.
So the other thing I would say, for anybody who's like, okay, so where do I go to learn some of these skills? I would say, again, that would be something that would be a great thing to ask a graduate student, or even look at, let's say, like a society webpage. So like, I know that the Association for Psychological Science has a webpage that has like a bunch of great links that are specifically for psychology and sort of learning R and learning the parts of it that are really specific to the kinds of research that we do in this field. And, they've kind of vetted those and seen which ones are useful. And again, like asking grad students who they follow on academic Twitter is an amazing way to find out what's going on in the field. And a lot of these people are very methods oriented and will often post, sort of useful tutorials and often also useful graduate school application advice. I think the biggest thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help. Most of us who are doing this are really enthusiastic. We're doing this because we love it. And if we think that you might love it too, we're more than happy to help encourage that.
I would definitely second that. I think communication is key in a lot of these capacities. And I would say there's no such thing as an overshare or too many questions. We'd rather have too many questions about what's a good skill or how to learn one rather than, have you wondering. So less or more is less is more. Yeah, just ask away, I guess, is what we're trying to allude to.
All right, do folks have any other questions? Anything that you're like, I would really like to learn this, but I don't even know where to start? Advice on contacting grad students. All right, grad students, I will let you guys take that one.
Nia or Isaiah, either of you want to take that one?
Honestly, I've gotten a lot of students through Yulia. Yulia's forwarded me students. I've met students in class, but I'm not really, how do I want to say? I think I'm more laid back than a faculty member, honestly. I'm like, I know students are oftentimes just like trial and erroring, sending out professional emails and like asking the right questions. So I'm pretty available. I make myself pretty available for students, honestly. I like talking through like why do you want to work in this research lab, and just asking questions like that so they can understand also like what the space is or what they're trying to get out of it. But I don't know if I have any, try to be as professional as possible. I'm like really nice about it though. I don't know about everyone else, but I understand that we're learning how to navigate.
Yeah. So Jana, can you expand on your question a little bit? Like, are you confused about how to find which graduate student you should talk to or how you should frame the letter? Can you tell us a little bit more about your question?
Yeah, I'm just confused about like, how do I, like, which grad student to reach out to? So like, should it be from a class I'm taking? Because I'm still very much undecided into like specifically what kind of major I want to do in psych. So I don't know which direction to take that, and if that makes any sense.
Okay, that's I can actually give you, thank you, Cindy, that was great. So I find that, well, I guess maybe this is a little me specific as well. So I'm just really open to talking. So I always encourage my students, if they were interested in research positions, come and talk to me about whatever they're interested in, and maybe I could help navigate and direct them to where they might need to head. And so that would be my advice. If you've had a GSI that you've liked and that maybe they have 5 to 10 minutes to talk to you, that could be a good way to kind of get a jump start if you don't know where to start in that process, or even figuring out, where these certain places are in the department. Oftentimes talking to people how you get there faster, but that would be my suggestion for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I agree with what's been said. I also think that just from a more like logistical standpoint, like one thing that I've learned to do is, if I'm trying to find a time to speak to someone, is just letting them know my availability, like right off the bat. And it may feel a little bit presumptuous to do that, right? But it does make finding a time that much easier. And if I can see, oh, someone has like, kind of thought about like when they might be able to talk, I can easily say, yes, I have availability, or no. So there's not as much back and forth, because it's like the more emails that you have to send, the greater the likelihood is that you're going to catch someone when they're busy. So if you can be just really clear, like, what you would like to discuss, and just offer up some potential times and be really specific, I think that will, that may increase, the likelihood of it. Not to say that people won't respond if you don't do those things, but it may make it easier for the graduate student to kind of orient themselves and think about how to best support you.
I think those are all such excellent points. And I think just to build off of that a little bit, it would be really helpful to come prepared with some like topics of conversation or questions that you're particularly curious about that might help you navigate like the particular area in psychology that it is that you might be interested in, because grad students typically know a lot of other grad students. So maybe you didn't know that you're actually talking about one kind of avenue of psychology that the grad student that you're actually approaching could recommend another grad student for you to connect with, and that could bridge a research opportunity. So the more prepared that you are in approaching the grad student could actually lead to something really meaningful for you too. So, there have been lots of experiences in which like an undergrad has approached me and asked, can I come talk to you about your research? And they come and they think I'm a clinical psychologist, and I actually sort of like hand them off to one of my grad student friends who is a clinical psychologist, and they've been able to find a really amazing research assistant as a result of that. So I think come in prepared with questions and expect the best.
Yeah, and in terms of, sort of finding your research area, so Sarah had some good things at the beginning of the presentation, sort of see which topics grab your interest in your classes, what you find yourself thinking about. The other thing that I think is an underutilized resource is email your department administrator or your department secretary and ask them to put you onto the department's weekly email. Most of them will have them for the talks that are going on in the department every week. And just kind of, even if you don't have time to go to all of the ones that interest you, just sort of track like which titles and abstracts do you find yourself thinking like, oh, that looks kind of cool. And then if you do have time to actually go to the talk, and that gives you a really great opening then to talk to that person and say, hey, I went to your talk, I found this really fascinating. I'm wondering if you have, either any openings in your lab, or if not in your lab, if you can give me some advice about how I can get involved in this area of research. And, I would, most people, if you, spend the time to come to their talk, they're going to find that incredibly flattering. And I think they would find it very hard to resist answering you and encouraging you along in that case. So is the newsletter different from the psych department newsletter? So we actually, if you're here at Michigan, we have a number of different ones. So there's the undergrad psych newsletter that you get from the Student Academic Affairs. But I'm not sure which ones you all get as undergraduates, but what I would say is if you're here at Michigan's, email psych.admin and just say you want to go onto the weekly talks email. And if you're at, if you're someplace else, well, actually you could get on the one for here at Michigan because everything's virtual now anyways. So you're more than welcome to come and check out our faculty and grad students and their talks too. But if you would like to do it more, at your place, I would say, just email your department secretary and say, is there a list of talks that goes out every week and could I get onto that? And they'll help you figure it out, I'm sure.
Any other questions that we can help you navigate, or comments or anything else? Oh, thanks, Caitlin. That's super helpful. Here's the email.
Well, if you guys don't have any questions, thank you so much again for coming, and thank you to Sarah, Isaiah, and Nia for all of your help as well. And I hope that we gave you guys some good ideas and also some hope, even during this somewhat challenging time. But as I said, I would strongly encourage you to think about this creatively and sort of make lemonade from the lemons.
Michael, just for your question quickly, I don't think it's not too late, but I would do it as soon as possible. Michael wondered if it's too late to apply for research in the winter term.
No, I would go ahead and express your interest now.
And if any questions come up for anybody else, feel free to pop an email our way. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you all at our next workshop on November 11th.
And don't forget to apply to the program too, but it's November 6th is the deadline.
A reminder. Great.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks everyone.
All right, good night. Bye everybody.